You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Welcome to another episode of Global Trade This Week. My name is Doug Draper. I'm one of your hosts for the show. And I'm excited because both of us are back in action. Pete, you were out last week, but you're here this week. I love it. You're in a nice hotel I can see from your backdrop. But Pete Mento, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I was going to call this like an after hours edition of Global Trade This Week because we're recording it so late. But yep, doing all right, bud. I'm holding it together. These last 3 weeks have been really miserable. So yeah. Holding it together, buddy. Holding it together.
Yes. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, everybody is wanting your knowledge, not only your tribal knowledge on tariffs and global trade, but everything else. So you're jet set, and we were just talking about your schedule. I don't even think you sleep in your own bed for weeks.
I haven't been, but it's been like that for a while. This has been pretty breakneck travel past 2 years. So I'm actually saying no to speaking engagements. I made that decision last week. So unless it's something like TPM, you can't say no to TPM.
Yeah.
And there are friends of mine that have asked me to come and speak at stuff. Other than that, I'm just saying no to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, good for you. You got to look out for yourself, for health,
Sure.
man.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, last week's show was from Manifest. I did a little traveling myself. Everybody's probably heard of that trade show. And everybody there was like, are you going to TPM? You going to TPM? Oh my God, TPM. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of sales guys there holding their phone up to do selfies to validate their presence. So look out for that.
TPM is probably, so it depends, right? If you're a BCO, I think TPM is super important because you're going to end up meeting with the carriers. You're going to have sit downs with like us, like real substantial meetings and conversations. But after those meetings happen, man, it's like red carpet Oscar parties left and right. I mean, these parties, these forwarders throw are pretty extensive. And then because everyone's together, like Doug, I mean, think about, you haven't worked for as many companies as I have, but when I go to one of these things, like ICPA is another example of that, or the Air Forwarders Associated meetings, you run into like 50 people that you've worked with at some point in your career, and you want to catch up, you want to see them. And so before you know it, you're at some Irish bar after hours, and it's 12 o'clock, and you've got 30 people all buying each other rounds. And I am too old for that, Doug. I will. I'm going to see everyone I need to see at TPM. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to give my speech. But come around 9 o'clock, Big Daddy's going to be in bed. Just letting everybody know right now. I'm not the young man I used to be. It's very different.
Yeah.
Did you guys party at Manifest?
No, there were definitely parties, but I'm with you, man. I kind of ducked out after. I got to some dinners and and it was in Vegas, right? So the dinners are just unbelievable.
I can only imagine.
There was one friend that's like, hey, you want to go to dinner tonight? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Thinking it was going to be casual. He goes, here's the link. And it was some gal or it was a woman whose company was designed to create like an upper echelon networking event for our industry. It was a five-course meal. You could stand up and talk about this and a guest speaker. $475.
What?
Yeah. Exactly. I'm like, sure. I was thinking we'd just go to, some normal restaurant, but this was like $475. Nope. Not doing that. That's insane. So
yeah, it doesn't work on my Applebee's budget, dude. It's just not gonna.
I'm with you. I'm like, I would probably can if I said, here's a $475, but it did include tip and all gratuity. So, got to throw that in there. But
I used to joke all the time with this guy I worked with. He'd say, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, can we just pick up a 12-pack and go to Taco Bell and sit in the parking lot like high school? And I came out there one summer, and he had a guy that worked in his office who didn't drink drive us. And we literally went and got Taco Bell and sat in the parking lot and drank beers. It was awesome. Like, it was one of my favorite business meals ever. It was fantastic. Yeah. So, when you travel a lot, the offices where you work, they want to get you out for team building. They want you to be around people that you work with. They want you to engage. And I'm all for that. But when you travel 5 days a week, it's just not, it's not good. And I have to draw the line.
Yeah.
Like I said, Big Daddy's going to bed early, so you want to go out and get dinner. Like I said, we're probably hitting Applebee's or Chili's or random corporate steakhouse, and I will tell you I am done, and I will get an Uber home if I have to. But
Good for you.
I'm not staying out.
Good for you. All right.
All right,
Well,
yeah.
hey,
So
what's that? I was going to say, let's jump into our first topic,
yeah,
but if you got something else.
no. That I was going to say the same thing. I was like, let's make a show, right? So my first topic is something that I don't think we expected or saw coming with de minimis in e-commerce. We've mentioned many times on the show how de minimis works. And we've also talked about the very positive things about it and many of the troubling issues that have come up with e-commerce through de minimis. And during President Trump's initial executive orders, he axed it. He stopped Chinese de minimis, and most of the products we're talking about in de minimis, they're coming from China. But what hadn't really happened was thought into how these companies were going to respond. So you have large e-commerce companies that now have to make real consumption entries of these small packages. And they can be extreme. They can be 10, 20,000 entry line on an entry that have additional entries because of partner government agencies. They got to pay tariffs on this stuff now, which means they have to go out and they have to secure a bond. And that's all great, right? So these companies are smart enough and capable enough. They have great people that are running their custom stuff, but no one bothered talking to customs. No one bothered to say to customs, hey, we're not going to stop selling stuff. We're not going to stop engaging in this industry. So someone might want to call up CBP and let them know that's going to happen. No one did. No one called customs and said, hey, are you ready for 10,000 line type 1 entries? Are you ready for just the deluge of data that you're going to get? Customs website, their operating system can only take 999 entries at a time, which means you have to double up on there's like a workaround process for it. But it's not easy to do. And Customs is now managing this new fresh hell associated with this. So that's why President Trump sort of stepped in and said, all right, we're going to go back to de minimis the way it was done for a little while. But as soon as we have a way of managing this, we're going right back to what I said. So CBP, figure out your internal processes and administration, which, somebody should have told them ahead of time. This was, you know what I mean? And we're going to go right back to the old way. And I'm bringing all this up, Doug, for a broader topic, which is the complete disconnect between legislators and CBP or legislators and FDA and you name it, right? They come up with a law and they implement it. And I don't know that very often they take into account how complicated it's going to be for a federal agency to actually execute the dream that they have. And something needs to change. There needs to be more direct interaction. And me being selfish and a customs guy, particularly with CBP, they're understaffed, they're underfunded, and they're trying their damnedest to do what the government's asking them to do. But unfortunately, they're not getting enough lead time to do what's right, Doug. And I think this, along with the pending tariffs, are going to end up being a real problem if we don't get them more involved in the front end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think a couple things to unpack there. Number one, the administrative burden is just astronomical. You nailed that, right? That was the first thing. It's like, well, the first thing was like my tennis shoes I can't buy for $22 anymore. The second thing was like, how the hell are they going to administer this, right? And the second thing is, yes, it will be impactful, but to use my example of $22 sneakers, if I got to pay $28 for them, that's still a pretty damn good deal. So pass the duties and taxes on, and it will be diminished a little bit, no pun intended, but it's not going to stop. And so I think you're spot on. It's like sales and ops, right? The operations guy is like, what the hell did that sales guy just commit to? I don't think we can make that happen the way that he said or she said. Certainly I've been in conversations like that in my sales career, right? But I think the administrative burden is the biggest thing. Forget about I can't get my stuff anymore. Forget about some of the purposes of why they want to eliminate de minimis with fentanyl and things coming in. But that burden's real, right? So great point.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this, Doug, genie's out of the bottle. Pandora's box has been opened. American consumers don't want to go backward. So whatever's happening here, I think that there's an opportunity to find an answer that lives up to both security requirements and trade requirements, but it's going to take a little bit of work and cooperation between these two countries, between China and the United States. And I
Yeah.
certainly hope they find a way to do it, because no one's going to stop wanting to buy inexpensive fast fashion. They're not going to want to stop buying just regular retail at discounted costs. It's something that people have come to expect, not just enjoy, they expect that level of service. And we better get on the stick and come up with an answer to this, because 10 years from now, there will still be de minimis shipments. So we have to find a way to make them more secure and to try to bring smugglers and counterfeiters out of the equation.
Yeah. Good point. All right.
What you
I'm
got,
gonna
Doug?
Yeah. Mine's a little less impactful, but this is a show about global trade, and there's trade that transpires more so than just China and the Asian markets. But this is crazy, Pete. Um, Somebody brought this to my attention that is not in our industry. It's actually a teacher. It's like, hey, did you hear about this cocoa thing going on and its impacts? And I think people that may have followed this or as a chocolatier, that the price of cocoa has started to escalate. And I guess it's becoming a topic because A, we just had Valentine's, and B, Easter's coming up, and lots of chocolate and fun bunnies being made. But I didn't realize like 80% of all the cocoa comes from West Africa. Ivory Coast and Ghana are the two largest. And shocker, there's been impacts of weather. Call it global warming, depending on how you want to spin it. But too much rain, and then too much drought, and then too much rain, and so it's been the apple cart's been turned upside down. So I didn't realize this, but there in September, I looked this up. September 2022, a metric ton of cocoa was going for $2,200. January last month, $10,700 for a metric ton. So what that means is that there are lots of people out there, traders and brokers. They're just making it worse, so to speak, because they're trying to make a quick buck. It's almost like toilet paper during the pandemic, right? People would pay astronomical. Now, shipping lanes are starting to increase, or the rates from those shipping lanes. Now, Ivory Coast and Ghana is not Southeast Asia by any stretch of the means, but this is global trade. It's important that we call this thing out. That they're not expecting. The information I had read and the experts in the cocoa world have said this is not like, oh, it'll be fixed next month. It's going to continue. The only caveat is that Ecuador, of all places, has started to say, hey, we can get into this racket. So their agriculture is spinning to support more cocoa and planted some trees and stuff. So probably 2 years from now, it'll flip, and the cocoa crisis will be behind us. But this topic is not as paramount as the stuff that you and I normally talk about. But there was a teacher that said, hey, you're in global trade. You do a weekly podcast, right? Did you hear about the cocoa? And I'm like, well, not really. So I owe it to that individual to bring this topic up and have a broader spectrum of global trade. Not as impactful, but worthwhile to note. So next time you're at dinner at your TPM, throw that one out there for some levity.
I'm going to make it worse, Doug. Okay?
Yeah, surprise her. What's up?
I'll turn into Dark Pete here, and make it worse.
There you go. I love it.
High 70 percentile, so figure somewhere between 77 and 80% of all the cocoa in the world is harvested by children that are working against their will, many of whom were trafficked from their homes in other parts of Africa to where they're actually doing this work. And widespread problem. It's not just in Africa, it's also in other parts of the world where this is happening. And the chocolate industry, as well as federal agencies, have been trying very hard to find ways to manage this problem. Typical cocoa farmer makes about $1,900 in profit on their entire crop. Think about that, right? And cocoa is in a situation where it has to be harvested and processed by hand. So I always find it mildly ironic that at Halloween, we're giving chocolate to children from cocoa that was most likely processed by children. And the industry in and of itself is working diligently to try to find a way to manage this. You have a lot of chocolate now that is cruelty-free, chocolate. You can find it on the labels. But I think this is a problem before the problem, right? So you've got vast amounts of cocoa that aren't going to be put in the marketplace which means you're going to have to lower your cost of production even more, which means that the incentive to defect and do something wrong by these farmers is even higher. And eventually, when we do manage to create cocoa in a world free of slavery, in a world free of forced labor, the price is going to go up. So one way or the other, I think that the halcyon days of inexpensive chocolate are probably out the window, buddy. But yeah, you talk about this effect. My daughter will go to Starbucks with me, and I'll get my coffee, and she'll order some double chocolate frap, whatever the crap it is she drinks. And I don't know if she realizes that chocolate flavoring starts in a huge supply chain that goes back to an African plantation that right now is going through financial desperation because of geological and weather effects.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at the cotton clothing that we wear, right, we look at the food that we eat. I wonder if the typical normie, right, not you or me or people in this industry, truly understand how complex it is and how one domino falling like this, the cost of cocoa, can completely and radically change so much about supply chains. Think about this, Doug. Those parts of Africa, cocoa exports are a major part of ocean transportation. If you're not exporting cocoa, what's that mean for the transportation market in that particular part of the world? It's another knock-on effect. I know people think what we do is painfully boring, but this stuff is very, very interesting when you begin to understand how it impacts everybody on the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Great
I'm
points
sorry,
on that one, Pete.
I just exploded with nerd right there. It's like I just blew
No,
up.
you
Dark,
brought a different perspective, which I
yeah,
think is more important than, well, they're both important, global warming and the things of that nature. But you brought the forced labor thing to the table, which is an interesting take.
Dark Pete might have to be a reoccurring character, Doug.
I know. I didn't see that one. That kind of came out of left field for me. So
Dark Pete. You think I'm dark now? Wait till Dark Pete comes out. It'll really scare the hell out of everybody.
yeah, cool. All
Well,
right.
that
Well, that
brings us.
brings us. Yeah, do it. This will be a good one.
This brings us to halftime, which Doug likes to say is our favorite part of the show. It is not, in fact, our favorite part. It is absolutely Doug's favorite part of the show. I play along because I adore him so much with this halftime shenanigans. It's brought to you by our very good friends and our sponsors at Cap Logistics. We want to thank them for their unwavering support of the show, and we encourage all of you to learn more about them at caplogistics.com. I will mention again, neither Doug nor I work for Cap Logistics, and they still support this show. So kudos to them. Give them a look. You know who we work for. Pretty easy to find us. But Cap Logistics deserves a good look from all of you for the continued support of the show. So, Doug, who's going to go first this week on halftime?
I'll go first since you just did that lovely cue up, right? And I'll tell you what, Saturday Night Live, you got to talk about it. It just happened last night. We're not supposed to timestamp podcasts, so you know what day this is being taped. But the 50th anniversary special went like 3 hours and 15 minutes. Absolutely loved it. I loved it. It was so awesome to see all the reoccurring characters that came back, all of the people that you forgot that were former cast members on the show that have gone on to do bigger and better things, right? That may have only been a cast member for a short period of time. But the skits, the connectivity, the messaging, it was all on point. I loved it. Normally, I'm not into those type of things. I don't watch any of the award ceremonies or award shows. But I'll tell you what, I was laughing out loud. And it was phenomenal. I didn't know what to expect. I had to watch it. I like Saturday Night Live. And there you go. So I think you may have a different take on it. I'm ready for it. What is it?
So there's an anecdote, Doug, that if you took 1 million monkeys and you put them in a room with typewriters, eventually they would write Shakespeare. Okay, so before they got to Shakespeare, they would probably write like the script to like Geely. They might write a script to Laverne and Shirley, but like 1,000 of those scripts before that would be last night's Saturday Night Live special. That special was an abomination. It was a war. It was an insult to sketch comedy. It was trashy, trash. There were 4 minutes of that show that were worth watching, and that was Adam Sandler's song. Other than that, everyone associated with that show should be fired. People that were on that show should be ashamed of how horrible it was. It was the 50th anniversary of the most important sketch show ever made. And It was the 50th anniversary of celebrating a true American type of art, which is stand-up comedy, sketch comedy, improvisational comedy. We invented it and we're the best at it. They should have spent the 3.5 hours showing old sketches, the best of the best. That's it. All of this like self-congratulatory back clapping of the trash that they put out there for skits was just an excuse slapped together by people who wanted to be on the show. And I'm angry. Like I'm glad that you're elated about it. But as somebody who, has truly been connected with that show since I was 7 years old, okay, I hated every second of it, except for Manchester's own Adam Sandler, who did an excellent job and choked up when he talked about his friends that had passed away. That show needs to be lit on fire and put out with nuclear waste, and then we should salt the ground after it so that it never rises again. Doug, I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. Leave the comedy to me.
Well, we could go back and forth. Absolutely disagree with you, right? And that's called the infinite monkey theorem is what you just described. I have no idea why I know that. But anyway, you hated it. I loved it. We'll let the audience make their comments on the post of the show to get the feedback. And I bet most people will be on my side.
You know what I did love, Doug, was I think last week they did a music show.
Yeah.
Or the week before. I love that. I love seeing all the old musical acts. And that's what I really wanted yesterday from that Hindenburg of a television show, was to have a moment to look back at some of those sketches, maybe even the ones that were cut for time where they have it from the rehearsal. I would have loved to have seen that as well. But instead, I got this modernized, oh God, it was terrible, Doug, terrible. I'll leave it there. We will agree to disagree on this topic.
Yeah, fair enough. And it may happen again as soon as you start the next one.
Okay. So I'm Doug and I both are unapologetic fans of athletics and sports. And the two of us are big fans of sports that maybe people don't think about very often. Doug's daughter is a very accomplished rower. In college, she was a very accomplished rower. I love rugby. Love rugby. My stepson is a very accomplished rugby player. I played for quite a long time. I was a very mediocre rugby player, but I enjoyed playing. These are sports that people don't put a lot of attention on. Rowing, tennis is another example. Swimming, another example, right? Incredible sports to watch when you realize the amount of physical prowess required to do it. Any of you watching the show that think you're in great shape, get on a rowing machine for a little while. You'll find out what a soft punk you are. Okay, so the reason I'm bringing all this up is, of the major American sports, you have the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NHL. The All-Star games suck with a capital S. They're terrible, right? So the basketball All-Star competition, all that crap, the best players don't even get involved. I think the guy that won the dunk contest is like a B League dude, and he just kills it every year, right? He shows up to basically do the dunks. Major League Baseball, it got so bad that they had to give you an incentive if you won, that your league would have home advantage during the World Series. That's how crappy it got. Okay. We only get to see the players we want for a little bit in that. It's bad. The NFL, they play flag football now, which I'll have to admit, it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch. And now, from what I understand, the Olympics are going to have flag football too. So whatever. But I love the old one, where the guys would have on their old helmet, their real helmet with the new uniform, and you'd see these guys. It was wonderful. Okay. The NHL this last weekend cracked the code. The old NHL All-Star game was nothing but offense and guys not wanting to hit each other because you don't want anybody to get hurt. Because of the political environment that we're in right now, the NHL All-Star weekend really came to a head and exploded on Saturday between the United States and Canada in something called the Four Nations Tournament, where Canada, Finland, Sweden, and I think it's Canada, Finland, Sweden, and the United States all play for a tournament. Canada and the USA are going to meet in the final. But this weekend, when the national anthem was played, everybody booed. It was pretty ugly. And then the Chuck brothers went out there and just started lighting up Canadian dudes. And it was awesome. And then in the first 9 seconds of the game, okay, we had two fights. And then both teams got into it. around the Canadian goal. They were just smacking each other around. And then the USA came out to win a very decisive win against Canada. Do I applaud all the violence? I mean, yeah, I love violence in hockey. It's just who I am. But I think more importantly, I love this tournament. I love this idea. And I think the NBA should do USA versus the rest of the world. I think that'd be interesting, right? You'd have the Serbians playing against the guys from the US, Wemby from France, against the best guys from the US. I think Major League Baseball should consider this. I think they should take that weekend or that week of the All-Stars, and they should do a smaller version of the World Baseball Classic where like the Caribbean or Latin America play against the US and Asia. I think that'd be kind of interesting. But I loved this game. I have a feeling you're going to tell me you hated it. I loved this game. I can't wait for the final, which I think is Thursday night in Boston. Tickets are going for $1,500 to $2,000 in the cheap seats.
Wow.
Right? People are very excited for it. So most All-Star games suck. This tournament is fantastic.
Well, until you brought this up, I had no idea that the NHL All-Star Weekend was even happening. Right? Didn't know.
No.
I did see on the fly-by-night news media, specifically Reddit, where I saw that fight, and I thought that was awesome. Like literally 9 seconds, just going at it, right?
Yep.
Which is
brothers.
Apropos for this thing, for the the global tensions that we're in right now. So anyway, I think the bottom line this is all All-Star games are changing because the consumer and the viewer need something faster, better, more entertaining. And the old school versions that we saw when you and I were growing up just don't draw any eyeballs anymore.
You remember how cool it was, like the 3-point when Bird was out there with Magic, and we all knew them, we loved them, we loved watching it. I miss that, and I miss that the game mattered to them. And I think that and all credit to them, they make so much money. Mm-hmm. These guys don't want to get hurt in some exhibition game, and I understand that. But hockey players do not give a damn, and they will go out there and say what you will about that fight. The Canadian dudes were like, "Yeah, let's go." Right? They both were like, "Let's go." Right? Everybody was so charged and pumped up. People are giving the Chuck brothers all this credit for doing it. I think we're overlooking the fact that the Canadian guys are like, "You want to go? Let's go." Right? It was two groups of people that were emotionally charged, just threw down in the middle of the ice. I 100% put the seal of approval on that, and I can't wait for next year. I can't wait for Thursday, but I can't wait for next year.
Nice. All right. Well, that was halftime. I don't know if it was my favorite part of the show this go around for this episode, Pete, but it was entertaining. And it's nice because a lot of times we agree or compliment each other's takes, but, SNL and hockey, definitely different perspectives, which is good.
Yeah. Well, my next topic is very topical. How about that, right? So the president has announced his intention to put what are called reciprocal tariffs on foreign countries' imports. For the best example I give people is cars. If you were going to sell a Ford over in Germany, that Ford would have a 10% tariff when it was imported. And then on top of that, there would be a VAT, which is a national sales tax. That will be on top of that, which would mean that the cost of the car would be, compared to other cars, 10% higher than other local cars. In the United States, our tariff is 2.5% on these European cars. And there are a number of countless other examples I could give you where they tariff things higher than we do. Now, there's ones that go in the opposite direction too, which have been very conveniently left out of this. The United States has a lower average tariff than any other country in the world except Canada. And we have done that because of our desire to consume and the fact that we're able to use that big stick to get people to do what we want with diplomacy. So we were all waiting last week. I mean, it was a tough Wednesday, man. Like, we're all waiting for the president to make this, in my world, make this example of these countries. And what he did instead was he said, I'm going to ask for a report. I'm going to ask for a report to understand where these tariffs are applied and how it impacts our economy. And I'm going to take that report and I'm going to implement tariffs based on what I hear back. And they're probably going to do it on individual areas of commerce, so automotive, aerospace, electronics, that kind of a thing. But that report is going to coincide with one coming out in April about all of global trade. So I'll say what I always say about these new tariffs: take a deep breath, no knee jerk reactions, wait to see how the dust settles. Because for many of these countries, it's going to be the opening to try to negotiate something between the two of us. India was, Prime Minister Modi was in DC last week. He made it very clear that he's open to trying to negotiate better relationships. And this could be a way of doing that. Also, President Trump is going to China in May. So being able to go to China in May and have this in his back pocket as part of the discussions to get us back on track, I think is there as well. So please have a plan B. Hope is not a strategy, but wait till the dust settles on these things before you freak out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I think we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, right? Where panic is more costly than patience. And things
Absolutely.
are just, we spoke about it many times. Things are happening so fast that, literally it was on a Sunday. I texted you about the de minimis and also that we were no longer accepting packages from China into the U.S. post office. And then literally the second half of the game I was watching, it was all taken care of, much like the Colombia situation the week before. So, you know what? Here's my take. It's all about negotiating. Nobody has sat down with the level of countries that in the last several presidencies and just reset our position on a global scale. And what's the fastest way to do that? I hate to say this, threats to move forward. If you don't sit down with me or if you don't do this, here's the retaliatory result. So I think let me rephrase that. I think most of these are posturing. I think we said about that a couple right after January, right? That most of this stuff is posturing to get ourselves in a better position to negotiate. That's going to benefit the United States, which I'm all for. It's just crazy how fast everything is moving, and that's part of it, right? You always talk about move fast and break things to try to come up with new ideas and new products and things. Move fast, break things. Hopefully, we're not breaking anything, but we're moving fast. So people are going to we're going to get their attention, and we're going to be at the table again to do what's right, at least for America. And I guess I'm kind of cool with that.
There's a quote, and I don't know who said it, but it's something to the effect of all conflict is an example of human beings' inability to rationally come to a conclusion, right? To not think. And right now, there's too much self-interest in all these countries. So someone going out and leveraging another one like this, it's just human nature because we can't find an easier way to get it because we're selfish. Countries, people, corporations, everyone. And that's how this is happening. I think for us, Doug, for people in our industry, it's been a wild. I mean, it hasn't even been a month, right? It's been a wild 3.5 weeks at this point of us just trying to keep up with the madness around us. And I am saying a quiet prayer for all of you that are in this business. And I just want you to know it's going to be okay. Reach out to your brokers, talk to one another, but above all, just stay calm.
Love it. Love it.
What you got,
All
Doug?
right. Yeah, I'll wind us up here. This is just a quick little take. I saw this, I think, pop up this morning on my feed, but Xi Jinping just had like a tech summit, right? A pro-business tech summit. And he got the or the founder of Alibaba. I think his name is Jack Ma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Huawei, they got these guys together. And they're talking about how they can get renewed support and private investment into Chinese businesses to try to reposition themselves in a pro-business model related to tech. And I think it's interesting that engaging the private sector and not just doing it with the CCP and doing it in-house, so to speak. I think that speaks to the point where with DeepSeek and where do these chips come from? And you alluded to it 2 shows ago about the regulations with sending chips over to China. But I think that China's like, hey, we need to engage the private sector more. We have some big players that are interested to sit down with us, meaning Alibaba and Huawei, and let's see what's going to happen. And it underscores the strategic importance of tech in the U.S. and Chinese rivalry, so to speak. But it could be weird with uncertainty of different regulations. and how all that plays out. But I thought it was interesting. It literally just happened like in the last 48 hours, so I wanted to bring it up on the show. But usually engaging the private sector, China doesn't do that. And so it's interesting to say, is that the way that they're going to be able to compete with the United States on a tech-forward economy? So I don't know. Did you hear about that at all? It
Yeah.
literally just went
So
down.
I did, and I think your last comments are the ones that I'm going to put onto this. Right, this is also part of China just broadcasting to the world. We'll be okay. Right, we're a billion people, and we have absolutely no problems managing our own economy and finding another way out other than having America be the main consumer of our goods. We will figure this out. So I think part of this also has to do with broadcasting to the world that we're in a much stronger position to negotiate than I think people realize. So I think that was part of it as well. But it's also part of the just continued evolution of the Chinese marketplace and the fact that you have these monolithic, gigantic companies that do have a lot to say about how wealth is generated and with that tax revenue, right, for the CCP. And they're being brought into the conversation. I'm a bit surprised by it, but I'm here for it. And I think also that long term, it's Xi Jinping letting the world know that he's not as afraid of negotiating and not as afraid of walking away as people think that he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that May meeting will be interesting for sure.
Yep. I will be nowhere near it. So looking forward to watching it and seeing all the leaks on Twitter of what happens. I'm wondering if they're going to bring our president McDonald's for dinner. I can't imagine he's going to get real high on the Chinese. Whenever I go to China, man, it's always a Thursday night. We go have a very expensive, very well prepared seafood meal, and that's normally when I eat very little and have a cheeseburger back at my hotel. So I feel you, Mr. President. I feel you on that.
Good, good.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to call it a close to this particular episode. We want to thank all of you for continuing to support the show and for listening, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. We want to thank our friends at Cap Logistics for continuing to support us. And I guess we want to give a half-hearted thank you to Keenan, who did, the kind of junior varsity work I thought he would do when he sat in for me last week. But he's trying. He's young. He'll get there. We got to let him pitch out of his problems. So, whatever. Thank you, Doug, for always being on and never letting us down. And as we always say, if it's happening in global trade, we'll be talking about it next week on Global Trade This Week. Take care, buddy.
All right. See you, Pete. Travel safe, my friend.
Thanks, buddy.